Hi guys, Guido here. So October is at the door, and like every year in October starts the Inktober Initiative. For the ones of you who don't know what it is, Inktober is a drawing challenge launched by a famous illustrator called Jake Parker and has been going on for several years now. The purpose of the challenge is to promote the habit of drawing and the desire to improve. The rules are very simple. It's about to make an ink drawing every day of October and post it online with the hashtag Inktober and Inktober 2017. And that's it. I will participate this year too, and the intent of this video is also to tempt someone else to participate. Because I am of the idea that anyone can learn to draw, and sketching is the way good ideas become projects. So I would like to show you which are the materials and the tools I personally use in my sketches. I will start from the paper. The types of paper I use are mostly 5, and they change according to the technique I use. The first is a classic sketch paper, 60 pounds or more, of which the thing I'm most interested in is that it's textured. In the description you will find a link to this kind of sketch pad. I use this paper to draw with ballpoint pens, because on textured paper they have the characteristic to leave a variable stroke, depending on how much pressure you use. These allow you to trace very light construction lines and work on the design before to mark the contours of the drawing. Most of my ideas are translated into projects this way. I almost never use pencils because the use of an eraser would break the rhythm of the sketch, and the pencil stroke should however be retraced in pen, and this in a sketch make no sense to me. A ballpoint pen is a very versatile tool to use. I use these pens here because they are cheap and have a good stroke, but many others can be fine. It's just a matter of trying them and see what you like the most. One possible alternative to this kind of paper, if you make very confusing sketches or if you want to try out design variations, is to use a very thin paper like this. Because it is transparent and can be used a bit like Photoshop levels. You don't have to use tracing paper that is expensive and even too transparent. Just use a very thin paper, like this. I find this brand here in Italy, but I leave you the link to an alternative that you can use. With this paper you can put a rough sketch under a new page and trace it in a more precise way and maybe modify it or correct perspective and present it in a better way. This paper is obviously not suitable for markers. If you want to use markers, there are alternatives. An alternative, for example, is this one, which is as thin as the other, but bleed resistant. But of course it has another cost. This, however, is the perfect paper to use with markers, even for the way the strokes blend together. Regarding the markers, I usually use Copic Ciao. They are basically the same as this one called Sketch, only cost less and contain less ink. They both have one chisel tip and one brush tip, but the brush tip I almost never use. They are rechargeable with the proper refiller. The ones I use the most are the grays. Very often I start my sketches with the C1 marker so that the perspective and the dimensions of the drawing are almost invisible and then I start drawing with the pen. The ballpoint pens, though, cannot be used together with the markers because the ink melts with the marker's alcohol and becomes purple. Don't know if you can see it. So when I use markers, I use this set of pens of different thickness. They are good for every kind of ink drawing. Another type of paper I use is watercolor paper, when I use watercolors in my sketches. Now, watercolors are not very sketch friendly, but using a mixed media technique can give interesting results. Watercolor paper can be very expensive, and this because in reality it is not actual paper, but it is made with cotton. But since we are not making watercolor paintings, but simple sketches, I usually use a much cheaper paper that still works very well, and it's this one. It's a pretty thick paper, and it's made of 100% cellulose and not of cotton. Also for this I leave you a link in the description. As watercolors I use a very basic but good quality kit from Winsor and Newton. Individual colors can be changed according to your preferences or when you finish one. And I use synthetic watercolor brushes, flat and rounded. When I use watercolors is the only time I use a pencil to make a very light sketch, which then becomes invisible when the drawing is over and you add ink. Another technique I use with water is to use these Inktober brown pens, which have a water-soluble ink, so you just wet the stroke with some water to make shades and shadows. So I make some strokes. And then with a brush and some water, you can see what happens. Then when water dries, I can go right again over it. You can find these pens in different thickness and colors. Or I can use this brush with a little water tank where I can insert a liquid watercolor like this, very diluted, and make further nuances. This is a cool technique. The last kind of paper that I use is this Tone 10 sketch paper from Strathmore. It's a paper that I use a lot because it allows me to add white and make my sketches to stand out more. On this paper you can use markers, even if you have to be careful because they can bleed on the other side. Pencils can be used, such as the white one, to add light reflections. You can add ink, even the white one. So it's a very interesting paper. A very cheap alternative to this paper is this. A little darker. But what type of paper is this? Very simple. Amazon envelopes. Not that from the boxes, but that from the cardboard envelopes. It costs you nothing, and it's a good quality paper. The last pen I would like to show you is this one. This is a brush pen from Pentel and has the peculiarities of having a brush tip. Using this pen with some practice, you can do both thin strokes and very wide strokes. It's a very interesting pen if you can use it. It works best on very smooth paper, such as marker paper. I use it primarily to enlarge the contours of objects. I think we are done. There are other tools that I use, but I will say these are the ones I use most often. As I said, in the description you can find a link to each of the products I showed here. I would like to point out that I'm not paid from any of these companies. I have presented the products that I use and that I like to work with. If you want to see the sketches I will make during this Inktober, you can follow me on Instagram or on my Patreon page. These links also are in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel.